bones joint. And lab exam is everything from first lab to the bones. Skeleton.
No joints? No joints in the exam?
Lab exam, no joints.
No joints, okay.
Epithelial, connective, and muscle and nerve. And bones.
Okay, everybody. So today we'll talk about the joints. First, we'll know what is a joint. Then we'll talk about the classification of joints. There are many different types of joints present in the skeleton, and how we classify the joints. We'll see that. Then we'll talk about the most common type joint, which is called the synovial joint. Okay, most common type. So we'll see the properties of a synovial joint. Okay. Then we'll talk about different types of movement that occur in the joints. We know that we move our body parts at the joints, right? And what are different types of movements that occur in the joints. Then we will talk about a couple of large synovial joints. We'll see the knee joint and shoulder joint. Those are large synovial joints. Okay. So first, what is a joint? Joint is a location where two or more bones unite or meet or articulate. Okay? Joints are also called articulations. Now, you see here, this is elbow joint, right? You know that? Elbow joint. Mm-hmm. And you see three bones are meeting here, right? So, three bones. This is shoulder joint. Two bones meet here, right? The head of the humerus and the labral cavity of the scapula. So, two or more bones unite or meet or articulate. Okay? Now, joints are the locations where we move our body parts with the help of what? The muscles, right? Without muscles, you won't be able to move the bones or body parts, right? So, our muscles help to move the bones where? At the joints. Is it clear? Okay. So, classification. We divide the joints in two ways. One is functional classification by looking at the amount of movement, okay, how much movement occurs. And another classification is by structure, so-called structural classification, okay. So functional classification by looking at the amount of movement, structural classification by looking at the structures present in the joint. Simple. By looking at the movement, we divide the joints into three types: synarthrosis, amphiarthrosis, and diarthrosis. Okay, so SAD, SAD. Okay, so you remember that. Now, synarthrosis no movement. So, no movement occurs in this type of joints. Example, sutures. You see, you know that sutures are the joints between the cranial bones or skull bones. No movement occurs in these joints. Okay? So, synarthrosis. Then amphioarthrosis, slight movement or a small amount of movement. Okay? Example, the joints between the ribs and the sternum. We know that when you breathe, slight movement of the ribs occur, right? You know that ribs move slightly, not too much, right? A little bit expansion, then contraction. So, slight movement. Then diarthrosis, plenty of movement or freely movable, free movement. Okay, a lot of movement. Example, your shoulder joint, you can move a lot, right? So, your elbow joint, you can move a lot. So, that's the functional. Then structure. Structural classification is based on the structure in the joint, the structure holding the bones or joining the bones together. Structural classification includes 3 types. One is fibrous, okay. Another is cartilaginous, and synovial. Okay, so 3 types of functional structure. Fibrous, the bones are held together by fibrous tissue, fibrous type connective tissue. Cartilaginous, bones are held together by what? Cartilages. Make sense? It's simple. And synovial, there is a gap between the bones. So, in that gap, you have fluid, synovial fluid, but they are not held by any solid structure, okay? There is a cavity in between the bones and fluid is there, okay? So that is synovial. Make sense? So fibrous, bones are held by what? Fibrous type connective tissue, right? Structure. And cartilaginous by cartilages, and synovial, basically fluid in between the bones, okay? Okay. Now, fibrous are 3 types. Sutures, okay, then syndesmosis, yes, syndesmosis, and then gymphosis. Okay. Those are 3 types of fibers: sutures, syndesmosis, and gymphosis. And then cartilaginous, 2 types: synchondrosis and symphysis. So if you see SIS here, for example, synchondrosis, SIS, that means I am indicating one joint, okay? If I say SES, that is plural, more than one, okay? So that is the difference. So sometimes we will see SIS, sometimes we will see SES. SES is plural, SIS is singular. Anyway, so you see here, the fibers could be sutures, syndesmosis, and synchondrosis. Sutures, syndesmosis, and synchondrosis. Gymphosis. Cartilaginous, synchondrosis, symphysis. Okay. Synovial, there are many different types. We will not go into detail of that. Just know that synovial is the most common, and there are different types. Okay. Now first let's go over the fibers. This one. one type of fibers is sutures. You see, the cranial bones or skull bones are attached by the sutures. You already know that. And if you see the suture joint under the microscope, you will see many short fibers. So this is the edge of one bone, this is another bone like this. So two bones, this is cranial bone, this is another cranial bone. For example, two parietal bones meet at sagittal suture. Here you see the bones are connected by many short fibers like this.
Is your skull more likely to break on the suture line?
Yes. So sutural joint is the most common type in the skull. Okay, so that is suture. Then syndesmosis. Syndesmosis, the bones are attached by the band of fibrous tissue, that means ligament. So ligament hold the bones together. For example, distal tibiofibular joint. This is distal tibiofibular joint, you know tibia and fibula, right? This is proximal and this is distal, right? And you have a ligament here that is connecting these two bones. So that is the example that I've given. You see the band of fibrous connective tissue. That is the ligament. So syndesmosis. Then gomphosis, where the teeth articulate with the jaw bones, the sockets of mandible and maxilla. You know those are the jaw bones, right? Mandible and maxilla, and teeth are attached to those bones. You see here the teeth. So the joint between the teeth and the bony sockets in mandible and maxilla. So that is gomphosis. If you see a gomphosis joint, you'll see that tooth is attached to the bony socket by a ligament that is called periodontal ligament. Periodontal ligament. Okay, periodontal ligament. Okay. Then cartilaginous type structure. Synchondrosis and Symphysis. Very simple. Both are cartilaginous, that means the bones are attached by cartilage, but in synchondrosis, the bones are attached by hyaline cartilage. What kind of cartilage? Hyaline. In symphysis, the bones are attached by fibrocartilage. So that is the difference. Is it clear? So in synchondrosis, bones are attached by hyaline cartilage, and in case of symphysis, by what? Fibrocartilage. Make sense? So pretty simple. Now you tell me, if I ask you, this is first rib and this is the sternum, right? You know that. This is hyaline cartilage. We know that. So this is a synchondrosis. Make sense? Now this one you see here, pubic symphysis. This is a fibrocartilage.
It's even called symphysis.
Second?
Pubic symphysis.
Yeah, its name is telling you symphysis, right? So it is a symphysis type joint. And it is a fibrocartilage. This is another symphysis joint. Intervertebral disc. The vertebrae are connected to each other because this is also fibrocartilage. We know that. Okay? So these are the examples of symphysis type joint. Now you see why I said first rib and sternum is synchondrosis. I didn't say these other ribs. The reason is other ribs belong to synovial joint. Belong to this one, synovial joint. Why? Because if you see inside these joints, other ribs, you will see cavity. Remember I said that in synovial you have cavity and fluid is there, right? So we see cavity inside and fluid. Okay? This one doesn't. So this is purely cartilage. Okay? Okay. Example of synchondrosis is the hyaline cartilage, first rib and sternum, and also the head of a long bone is attached to the shaft. Although we don't see from outside, but if you see inside the bone, you see the head of a long bone. For example, this is the head and this is the shaft. Inside this area, you will find a hyaline cartilage. Okay? So that is also synchondrosis joint. Usually fracture occurs there. Okay, here symphysis, fibrocartilage, pubic symphysis, and intervertebral joints. So that is the classification of the joints, functional and structural. Okay, now we will talk about the synovial joint. This is the synovial joint, most common type joint. Now, if you see a synovial joint, there are some properties. Those must be present in a synovial joint. What are those properties of a synovial joint? First, this is one bone, this is another bone, okay? So, the end of the bones that form the joint is covered by hyaline cartilage. So, the bones are covered by hyaline cartilage, and that is called articular cartilage, which is a hyaline, cartilage. So the ends of the bones are covered by articular cartilage. I have already mentioned there is a gap between the bones, there is a cavity, and that cavity contains the fluid. So this cavity is called synovial cavity. Synovial cavity contains what? Synovial fluid. Very simple. That fluid reduces the friction, helping mobility. And around the joint, like this is the joint. So around the joint is covered or wrapped by a membrane that is called capsule, articular capsule. Articular means joint, so articular capsule that is wrapping the joint around. Now this articular capsule has two layers. You see here, that's why I did draw this way. This is one layer and this is another layer. Outer layer is fibrous. Fibrous is tough or weak? I mentioned it before. Fibrous structure is very tough, right? More fibers, tough. That's it. So outer one is fibrous layer or fibrous capsule. And inner layer is called synovial membrane. So synovial membrane is inner and outer tough layer is fibrous capsule. Just if you think, simple, which one should be tough, outer one or inner one? Outer one, protection, right? That protects the joint. Inner one, synovial membrane, secretes synovial fluid into the cavity. So fluid actually comes from that membrane. The membrane secretes the fluid. So these structures must be present in a synovial joint. In your exam, if I ask you draw a synovial joint and show the parts of it, these are the structures they will show. Okay? Make sense?
Fibrous capsule is on the outside.
Yeah.
And the articular
Right. Now, in large synovial joints, not all, in large synovial joints, you will see some flattened membranous sacs. So, flattened membranous sacs filled with synovial fluid, and those sacs are called bursa. So, bursa are filled with synovial fluid, and they are present in large synovial joints like this. You see here, this is a bursa, like flattened membranous sac like this, filled with fluid, and it is located like this. And when you move the bone, it rolls. Make sense? It's like ball bearing. So, this is a bone, this is a ligament, okay, this is a ligament or muscle here. So, this bursa is in between. Make sense? Now, when I move this bone, what happens? The bursa rolls, right? And that reduces the friction, right? And increases the mobility, enhance the movement. Make sense? So, if I put wheel under your shoe, you'll move fast, right? Easy. So, like this. And the bursa are located between the bones and the ligaments, tendons, muscles, skin, in between those structures. Okay? Bone and other structures.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm confused. You said that the articular cartilage is the one that's on the inside, not on the outside. The fibrous capsule is the one on the inside. The articular cartilage is the one that is thicker and tougher, or it was the fibrous?
No, you got confused, because articular cartilage covers the end of the bone.
Yes, the fibrous capsule.
No. This is the articular cartilage. Cartilage is cartilage, okay? Hyaline cartilage. Make sense?
Yes, and then the
And
fibrous.
the capsule is like this, around.
Okay, I understand.
Okay? So, capsule has two layers. Okay. So, bursa are what? Fluid filled, flattened, membranous, what? Sacs, right? And they can roll, right, between the bone and other structures around the bone. That reduces the friction, right, and enhance the movement. Now, bursa are not present in all synovial joints. I said only in large synovial joints, right? That's why when I ask you to show me the structures in a synovial joint, you don't need to show bursa, because it is not an essential component of a synovial joint. Make sense? It is not present in all synovial joints. So, but these things must be present here in all synovial joints, right? The cavity should be there, the fluid should be there, the capsule should be around, right? And articular cartilage. So, now bursitis is the inflammation of bursa. Itis is inflammation. So bursitis is the inflammation of a bursa, and that can restrict the movement, cause painful movement if the bursa gets inflammation due to infection or excessive movement, too much pressure on the joint, that can cause inflammation of the bursa. Okay. Sometimes if something strongly hit, that can cause the burst of the bursa. Bursa can rupture. That can also restrict the movement. You see here a bursa. This is called subacromial bursa. You remember the name of this part of the scapula is called what? Acromion. Remember that? Acromion. So this is the head of the humerus, right? And in between we have here a bursa. Okay? That's why it is called what? acromial bursa. Make sense? Sub means under the acromial. So when you move your humerus, this bursa rolls here. Okay, under that bone and ligament, coracoacromial ligament is there. So it reduces the chance of friction. Okay. So that's how the bursa works. Movement. Different types of movements occur in synovial joint. Now, muscles move the bones at the joints. We know that. So, if you see a muscle is like this is a muscle. This muscle moves this joint. So, one end of this muscle is attached to this bone and the other end is attached to this bone, right? One end is here, another end is here. Now, if this end is attached to a fixed bone and this bone moves towards this bone during the movement, this end is called insertion and this end is called origin. So, origin is the end attached to the fixed bone, insertion is the end of the muscle attached to the bone that moves. Make sense? Now look at me. This is my arm, this is forearm, right? Who is moving? Forearm or arm? Forearm is moving, right? So, there are muscles like this. So, this is a muscle, okay? This is a muscle. So, which end is moving? This end, right? Attached to the bone that is moving. And this end is fixed, right? On fixed bone. So, this is the origin, this is the insertion. Make sense? So, always insertion moves towards the origin. Insertion moves towards the origin. Now, movement occurs usually in 3 planes. Those are the planes you have already learned in your lab part, first lab. So you tell me, this is one plane. Remember that? This is called what? Sagittal plane, right? And this is coronal or frontal plane, right? And this is transverse or horizontal. Remember that? Okay, good. So, look at me. I'm moving my head. Okay. This way, right? This way. So this is what? Transverse plane movement. Make sense? Okay. I am moving my upper part of my body like this. Make sense? So this is transverse. I'm moving my head this way. So this is transverse. Now, look at me. This is what? Sagittal. Make sense? This way. This is sagittal, right? So if I move my head like this is sagittal, right? If I move my body like this, that is also sagittal. And now, if I move like this is what? Frontal plane movement, right? So, those are the main planes for movement, okay? So, movement usually occurs in any of those 3 planes. Now, we'll talk about different movements in the synovial joint. One type of movement is called gliding. What happens in gliding, you see, 2 short bones. This is one short bone, this is another short bone, and this surface is flat, this surface is also flat. So 2 flat surfaces of 2 short bones move the bones like this. Make sense? If 2 flat surfaces, then movement will be like this, right? So that is gliding movement, like this. Okay? Usually occurs in between carpal bones. Carpal bones are short bones, you know that, right? So that sliding movement is called gliding. angular movements. There are different types of angular movements in which the size of the angle changes. For example, you look at me. Look at this area. This angle is getting smaller or bigger? Smaller, right? And now it is getting bigger. So the size is changing, right? So when the size of angle gets smaller, that is called flexion. So two bones come together, right? Close to each other. That is called flexion. Opposite of flexion is extension. Is it clear? So the angle is getting bigger in extension. Okay. So this is what? Flexion. This is extension. Of what? Forearm. Because forearm is moving, right? So that is. Now you see this angle here. I am moving my thigh upwards. This angle is getting what? Smaller, right? So this is the flexion of my thigh. This is the extension of my thigh, right? Now look at my leg. This angle is getting smaller, right? So this is the flexion of what? Leg. Because leg is moving now, right? And extension of leg. Okay? So flexion, extension. Now in some joints, you can move the bone beyond the extension. Look at me. My head, this angle is getting smaller. So this is what? Flexion of the head, right? This is extension of the head, right? Now if I ask you to move more, you can do like this, right? That is called hyperextension. Beyond extension, okay? So not in all joints you can do hyperextension. For example, you cannot do. You can do flexion, extension, right? You cannot go beyond that. But in your head, you can do flexion, extension, going back to normal position, then hyperextension, right? Look at my upper part of my body, flexion, right, of body, extension. I can also do hyperextension, okay? That is one type. Then another is abduction, adduction. You look at this angle, my armpit, okay? This angle is getting what? Bigger, right? So this is sideway movement, lateral and medial. So this is called abduction, taking the part away from the body or midline of the body. Abduction and bringing towards is called what? Adduction. Make sense? You know, sometimes we say the child was abducted from the parents, right? Taken away. So you are moving your body part away, right? So that is abduction. Okay? This is what? Adduction. Okay? Then circumduction. If I ask you to draw a circle like this, the movement at your shoulder joint is called circumduction. When you draw a circle, okay? Make sense? It could be a big circle or a small circle. I don't know if you are not familiar to sports that is called cricket. It's like baseball, but you cannot fold your, arm or forearm. You have to do like this. You have to throw the ball like this. Okay? So that is circumduction, right? Circle. If you move your foot like this, draw a circle on the ground, that is circumduction of hip joint, right? Circumduction of hip joint. So that is another movement. Rotation. In rotation, what happens? The angle doesn't change, the axis doesn't change. So this is rotation. Okay. Now, if I move my head this way, this is called rotation. If I move my head this way, this is called what? Circumduction, circle, right? Like this. But this is rotation. Got the difference? So circumduction is like this, right? Rotation is, axis is not changing, staying same. So axis, you see, this is the axis, this is rotation. Okay? Axis will not change. In circumduction, it is changing, right? So that is the difference. Now, lateral and medial rotation. If I move my head this way, that is lateral rotation. This is medial rotation, right? This is lateral rotation. This is medial rotation. Okay. Then supination, pronation. Yeah, supine, you know supine. If I lie down on my bed like this is supine position, okay? Now if I turn my body towards the bed like this, that is pronation, okay? Similarly, in case of your upper limb, when the palm is facing up, that is supine, okay? This is supine and this is pronation. So supination, where you are ending, supine position, right? Where you are ending, pronation, supination. In supination, the radius and ulna are parallel, like this, side by side. Now you look at this end of radius. When I do pronation, this end of radius is going to the other end. That means what? This end is staying same, but this end is going to the other side. That means the radius is crossing over the ulna. Make sense? Going like this in pronation. See here, right? So in pronation, the radius crosses over what? The ulna. Okay. Dorsiflexion, plantar flexion of foot. If this is your foot, this surface is called dorsal surface and sole is called what? Plantar surface. Make sense? So this is the dorsal surface, sole is the plantar surface. Now if I move my foot this way, that is dorsiflexion, because this is dorsal surface, right? So dorsiflexion. This is plantar surface. So this is what? Plantar flexion. Now, if I look at me, if I stand on my heel, that is what? Dorsiflexion. Stand on my toes, plantar flexion. Make sense? Okay. This is dorsiflexion. This is plantar flexion. Okay. Then inversion. This is your foot. If you move the big toe upwards, the plantar surface goes inwards like this. This is inversion, inwards, in, and this is eversion, outwards. Okay. So big toe is moving up in inversion. Make sense? And down in eversion. Then protraction and retraction. Have you seen protruded mandible? Have you heard that word? Protruded mandible. The mandible is pushed kind of outwards, right? Forward. So that is protraction. If the bone moves outwards or forwards, that is called protraction. And moving backwards is retraction, pulling back. We use the term, sometimes you'll hear, we have retracted the soldiers. Have you heard that? Retracted, pulled back, right? So, this is what? Protraction, right? Moving forward. Protraction of mandible. If I push my mandible forward, right? Retraction, bringing back. Okay. Then, elevation and depression. This is easy. If the bone moves downwards, that is depression, moves up, elevation. When you open your mouth, mandible moves which way? Down, right? So this is depression of mandible, and when you close your mouth, elevation, right? Depression, elevation. So those are different types of movements occur in your synovial joints. Different synovial joint has different type of movement. So here you see gliding between short carpal bones. You see flexion of head, extension, hyperextension. You see flexion of upper part of body, extension, hyperextension. But I showed you all of this. Flexion of leg, extension of leg, no hyperextension. Abduction, adduction, circumduction. Rotation, medial, lateral rotation. pronation, supination. You see in pronation, the radius crosses over the ulna. In supination, radius and ulna are going back to side by side. Dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. Inversion, eversion. Okay, depression, elevation, protraction, retraction. Okay, now we will see two large synovial joints. Large synovial joints include knee joint, elbow joint, shoulder joint, hip joint. Those are large synovial joints. We know that. Those are big joints. And a lot of movement is possible in those joints. So we'll just see the structure of a couple of those. We'll see the knee joint, we'll see the shoulder joint. Knee joint is the largest and most complex synovial joint or joint of the body. So this is a knee joint, you know that. Why it is complex? Because inside the knee joint you have three joints. How many? Three. Three joints together form the knee joint. What are those three joints? You already know those. You see here, the lower end of femur has two condyles. Remember that? Two condyles. Upper end of tibia has two condyles. So these two condyles articulate with these two condyles. So this is lateral, medial and lateral tibiofemoral joints. So this is one, this is another. Two condyles articulate with two condyles. So two joints, two tibiofemoral joints, lateral and medial. And another is the patella. This bone is attached to the femur. This is patellar surface. So these three joints together form the knee joint. Two tibiofemoral and one patellofemoral or femoropatellar. So those are three joints. Okay, that's why it is a complex joint. Three joints inside one, and this is the largest joint of the body. Now, if you see this joint structure, it is a synovial joint. So the ends of the bones are covered by hyaline cartilage or articular cartilage. You see there, that blue structure. There is a cavity that is called the synovial cavity. It is filled with what? Synovial fluid. Make sense? Those are the parts of synovial joint. So you have articular cartilage, you have synovial cavity, you have synovial fluid, you have capsule around the joint, articular capsule. So those structures are definitely in this joint. Also, you have ligaments and bursa. Inside the knee joint, you have cruciate ligaments, anterior and posterior cruciate ligaments. And what are the bursa? You have suprapatellar bursa. Its name is telling you its location. Supra means what? Above or below? Below. Above, right? Above the patella. That's why it is called suprapatellar bursa. Make sense? And another is deep infrapatellar bursa. That means below the patella and a little bit deeper. So deep infrapatellar bursa. And another one is subcutaneous. Sub means under, cutaneous means skin. You know that, right? So under the skin, you see in front of patella, you have a skin here, right? You have a skin here. You can feel that skin, right? Then patella, and in between the skin and patella, you have a bursa here. So it reduces the friction between the skin and the bone. So that is called pre-patellar bursa, but subcutaneous, under the skin, but before the patella. That's why it is called subcutaneous pre-patellar bursa. Okay, all this makes sense. Now, another structure you will find inside the knee joint, you all know that, that is called meniscus. Have you heard that? Meniscus. Turning of meniscus we commonly hear. So that is another structure. Now, outside of the knee joint, you have some structures. Above the patella, the muscles, the quadriceps muscles, are attached to the patella by tendon of quadriceps femoris. So these are the quadriceps muscles. Remember, these are the quadriceps muscles, right? So from these muscles, a tendon goes to the patella. So that is called tendon of quadriceps. Not difficult, right? Tendon of quadriceps. And the same structure, you see, is attached to the lower end of patella to the tibia, tibial tuberosity. Now this is called a ligament, not tendon. Why? The upper part is called a tendon, the lower one is a ligament, because